In the last part of our quest series where we got started, we had a lot of setup where we created a quest component and then a base quest and then a quest objective, and we didn't even really do anything with the quest component yet because there was a lot of things going on setting up the base objective and the base quest, and it's just a lot of overwhelming information. Today, we're going to put some of that into actual practice. We're going to create a location objective to work with. And we'll also set up a basic implementation of actually assigning those quests so that we can see something going on. So the way we do that is actually relatively easy. We come over to our base objective, which has a bunch of functions on it. As you might remember, we have this activate objective and finish objective and all that kind of good stuff. If you right click on that, we can make a child blueprint of this class and we can call this something like location objective. And for any time any quest needs to go to a specific location, this is the kind of objective that we will be creating. So let's open that up. Now, we already have a handful of functions, and the most important one is going to be, in this case, activate objective. So let's override that one. That's going to automatically call the parent function of this objective activate, which is going to just set the bool on this for is active to being true. We still want to do that, so we want to keep this orange node around. We're just going to add some stuff of our own for this specific type of objective afterwards. And the way we do that is actually relatively simple for a location objective. We're going to add in a new variable here, and this will be our location trigger, and that will be of type trigger base. So if you just type in trigger, you can see trigger base object reference. We'll make this a exposed and exposed on spawn type of variable, so that when we create a location objective, we can give in a location trigger that should trigger this to be completed. On activate objective, we pull in that location trigger and we simply bind to actor begin overlap. Now, fair warning, this will trigger whenever any actor overlaps with this specific trigger. So what you might want to do is set up some custom collision channel that your specific player character works on and tell that specific trigger to ignore everything except for your player character's channel. We're going to do this in a slightly different way though. What we'll do is we'll pull off of this event and we will create event. We need to do this because we're not in the event graph, we're inside of a function. So the way this works is we'll make another function that we can bind to this. So we can either select a function, which we don't have any matching functions, so we can just create a matching function, and this will be something like on location reached, which will have the information for the overlapping actor and the other actor. So in our case, we're just going to cast this to the third person character, because this will just check, hey, is the thing that just overlapped with us a third person character? Because the only thing that's going to be a third person character in your game most likely will be your player character. And if so, we just finish objective, which again is a function that we made last time, which just sets our objective to complete and calls out an event dispatcher. Now, doing this cast can be a little bit annoying because if you in your project use a third person character and then you go into a different project and that doesn't work quite as well anymore, that might be a little bit annoying. So a different way of doing something similar might be something along the lines of creating a blueprint interface, and let's call this quest utils. And we'll just get the quest component because we're going to need to fill out some quest component stuff anyway in a moment. And then we'll just have a simple output for the quest components, which of course will be of type, you'll never guess it, quest component. So quest component, object reference. This is always going to be an empty reference unless whatever we call it on implements this interface and this function and gives it an actual value. So now what we can do in our objective location, instead of doing a cast here, what we can do is on the other actor, we can get the quest component, and then we can just check if this is valid. This is only ever going to be valid when it is someone to do with a quest component. And if you want to go like real in-depth, you can even check on that quest component whether or not it has this specific quest and this objective is active, and all that we're going to skip over because that gets a little tedious fairly quickly. That's only really relevant if you have multiple players running around in your world at the same time that could potentially be triggering this. So now we have a location objective. It is as easy and as quick as that. So let's go back into our quests, and let's actually put our interface into that folder as well. If we go into our test quest, the thing that we set up before to show you how this works, just as a quick little overview again, in our base quest, we have the init objectives. That is a function that is designed to be overridden. In our individual quest, we'll overwrite that with creating objectives. So I created this base objective as an example, but what we'll do now is I will create a location objective instead. So we'll look for the location objective class, which will have all the same inputs, but also now has a location trigger. And we're going to populate that by just promoting it to a variable, and we'll call this location1, and make sure that this is exposed. Doesn't need to be exposed on spawn, only instance editable. But now what we'll do is it initiates the objectives and creates this objective that is looking out for this specific trigger. So now you can see that we can have 10 different triggers in a bunch of different places in the levels, all corresponding to different objectives that are mapped to different quests. This is why you want to have these quests all be their own individual blueprint classes, because now we can more individually script them out for very specific behavior. So let's just show you how that works. We can get our test quest and put it into the world. We can see our location1 over here is a variable that we can fill out. So let's put in a trigger. We can just make a trigger box, and we'll say the trigger box, we'll put that. Let's just do it like in my example project, and we're going to put it on like that little circle thing over there. So we'll just put it over here, make it a little bit bigger so that it's easier to overlap with, something like this, right? And then we can very simply just pick an actor from our scene. And now this objective is going to complete within this quest whenever we overlap with that thing. So we can test that by just going into our location objective here. And whenever this happens on finish objective, we'll just do in the base objective, we'll do a print string real quick that says objective ID. Let's append something to that, completed. And that's what we will be printing. Just as a temporary debugging solution, because we don't have any UI for this stuff yet, obviously. And for the full course, if you're watching this in the future, it should be all up on the YouTube channel already. But if you're watching this shortly after it was uploaded, there will be a link down below in the description to the Patreon where you can find the full course. And a very big thank you to all of my Patreons. You can see them on screen right now. If you want to help out supporting the channel, there's a link down below in the description to the Patreon page. A huge thank you to my Cave Digger tier supporters, Sir J. Thomas,